In this video, we'll show how to prep the ends of the Siemens SWA cable for both the coil side and the electrode side. First, we're going to start with a coil cable. Our first cut is going to be 14 centimeters back, or 140 millimeters. We're just going to mark that with a pen, and we actually use a small pipe wrench for this. As you can see, we'll just pop it in there, and we're just going to take off that outer grey sheathing. So once we're on our mark, we'll spin that around a few times, tightening it as we go. Just gives you a nice clean cut. Of course, you can use a Stanley knife, or you could use a hacksaw, whatever you've got, but we prefer to use this tool. It makes a nice clean cut. Once we've done that, you can see there it's broken all the way through down to the armour. I'm going to get a Stanley knife, and we're just going to peel away, obviously cutting away from ourselves, the sheath. There we go. So it just leaves a little bit connected at the top and the bottom, which we're going to break off. And then we'll just pull that outer sheath off, and we can throw that away. The next step is we've got the internal SWA cores now. So the easiest way I find to do this is just to give it a spin, and you see it breaks off. It's a little bit time consuming, and you may have a better way to do this, but this is the way that we find works for us. It gives a nice clean finish at the end. You could use a pair of snips to cut these away, but it does make the edge slightly jagged, so you have to go back and cut. But we find the easiest way is just to spin these off, go around, and they'll all go away. Here we go. I'll just show you how to use using the snips. Snip like so. But as you can see, it just leaves a bit of a jagged edge, so we prefer not to do that, but you can come back and clean it up after. Yeah, I'm just pointing out the jagged edge here again. So there, back off the camera, you can see now we've got that all prepped back. So our next cut is we want to come back on the sheathing. So this is going to be 15 millimeters. Again, we're just going to put a little mark. And then back with our cutting tool, we're going to spin that round on the mark, same as we did the first time, just to prep back that outer sheath a little bit further. There we go, spin it round, tighten as we go. And then same process, once that's through, we'll undo that, we'll get our Stanley knife, we'll just chop that end off. And that's the armour sheath prepped back, ready for terminating. So the next step is, as you can see here, if you've got any sharp bits, you can just cut those off. We're then going to cut back 80 millimeters, 8 centimeters, to prep back the inner cores. Little mark there. This time we're going to use our circulating cable cutting tool. Again, you could use a Stanley knife if you wanted to, but we prefer to use this little tool here. I've just sped this up slightly because it's a bit of a long process. And there we go, so we broke the cable, we're just going to peel that off. We've got our internal braiding, so we want to keep this internal braiding, so we're just going to use a screwdriver to pull that braiding apart. Just working our way down from the top. And then once we've got to the bottom, we can split that all up, and then we can wind it all together because we want to keep that braiding that is going to be used in the installation. You just nip the end off just to make sure it's nice and tidy. We're then going to pull off the plastic braiding that's around the outside here, the plastic sheath, sorry. Cut that away. And then next we're going to cut away the black because we don't actually need to use the black for this setup. And then I tend to just nip the blue and the brown back a little bit because we don't need those as long as the earth cable. So that's your basic set. Then we're going to prep back the end of the cables. And we are going to put ferrules on the end of ours. You don't have to, but we prefer to put ours on just for easy installation. So one on the brown, one onto the blue. Try that again. There we go, got that one onto the blue now, and then we're just going to use our crimp tool to crimp the ends of that cable. There we go. On the end of the earth, or the screen cable I should say, we're going to put a spade crimp. Again, you don't have to do this, this is just for easy installation, like so. And there's our coil cable. You've got your blue, your black, and your screen. So now we can move on to the electrode cable. Same process again. So start off with measuring 14 centimeters, bit of a mark. Basically the exact same process that we've already done for the coil cable. Going to get our tool, whatever tool you've got, wrap that round, making a nice clean cut. There we go, that's broken through onto the Stanley. A utility knife, cutting that through, chopping the bottom and the top off. Then we can just peel off that outer case. Same process again, winding around the SWA armour until you've got a nice flush end and all those strands are removed. 15mm back, prep back that outer sheath again. And this part's needed, so when you fit it in the SWA gland, how the gland goes together, you need this little bit of armour to bite into the olive which is inside the armoured gland. Cut that away with your Stanley knife. You can see here we've got a few jagged edges, so we're just going to trim those up just so they're nice, because when you do go to put them in your SWA gland, you want it to fit in nicely. If you've got a few longer strands, then it won't all butt up correctly. There we go. Again, measure again, same length as we did on the other cable, so 8 centimeters, 80mm, bit of a mark. And then we'll remove that inner sheath. There we go, pull that off. Again, same process again, pull back the braiding. Again, we need this braiding, we're going to use this the same as the last cable. So splitting down the middle. And then once we split down the middle, we will spin it all together. So there we go, that's all split. We'll then pull it all together, make that a nice tight braid. Nip the end off so you've got a bit of a long strand on there, so it makes it all nice and uniform. Get rid of that plastic coating. And then on the electric cable, we do use all three. So I'm just going to trim these down here a little bit again. Inside the colours, you've got blue, brown and black. We want the blue and the brown first. We're going to prepare those slightly differently. So there's your blue and your brown. We're going to use our prep tool again at the longest length we can. Prep 1, prep 2. And then for the black, we're just going to push that back down because we just want a smaller prep on the black. There we go. So we can pull these sheaths off. That leaves you with the braiding. For these internal braidings, we don't need to use this braiding at the flow meter end. You do need to fit it at the transmitter end, but not the flow meter end. So we can cut those away. Like so. But on the black, we do need to use that braiding. So you actually prep back the black sheath so it shows the copper underneath. You spin the braiding like we've just done there. So we're just going to prep that back now. There we go. And then you're going to spin the braiding and the copper together. You need to join those. There you go, like so. You can see the braiding around the outside and the copper all joined together. We're then going to put a ferrule over the end of those and crimp that on. We'll then do the same for the brown and the blue. Obviously they haven't got their braiding, we've already removed that. There we go, so we've got our right size crimp connector onto there. Just had a little bit of a strand sticking out, so I'm just going to pull that back off, give the end a bit of a spin, and then pop the crimp back on again. There we go, it's gone on better. Now we can crimp that down. Same process for the blue. There we go. And then our overall braid, again, we're going to put a spade connector on the end of that. Just make sure that pops through at the end so we know it's fully through. And we can crimp that down. And that's our electrode cable complete. So you've got your brown, you've got your black with your screen twisted, your blue, and then your outer screen with your spade connector fitted.